The sacred grove of Ethel pulsed with gentle light. Bioluminescent flowers opened and closed in rhythmic patterns, their soft blue and violet glow reflecting off the crystal-like bark of the ancient trees. In the center of the grove, Ilara stood with her arms outstretched, eyes closed in concentration. Her pale skin emitted a subtle radiance that synchronized with the forest around her. The intricate markings along her forearms, a birthright of all Ethelians, shifted between emerald and azure as energy flowed through the biological network connecting all life on the planet. As a star weaver, Ilara was responsible for maintaining the harmony of Ethel's vast energy web. Through meditation and careful manipulation of the light that emanated from her being, she could sense disturbances in the network and restore balance. This ritual, performed at the equinox, was particularly crucial, a calibration that would ensure stability for the season to come. She felt each strand of energy between her fingers like gossamer threads, delicate yet powerful. With practiced movements, she wove them together, strengthening weak connections and soothing chaotic nodes. The entire grove responded to her work, brightening and dimming in waves that rippled outward across the forest floor. Even the smallest creatures, luminous insects and floating spores, participated in the dance of light, their movements synchronized with Ilara's gentle guidance. Ethel was a sanctuary of biological harmony, a world where plant and animal existed in perfect symbiosis through the energy network that spanned the entire planet. Unlike the technological worlds of the Galactic Federation, Ethel's advanced civilization relied on understanding and nurturing this natural energy rather than imposing mechanical systems upon it. A sudden discord in the energy flow broke Ilara's concentration. She opened her eyes, their color shifting rapidly between gold and violet as she sensed an unfamiliar presence, something that did not belong to Ethel's harmonious web. The disruption came from beyond the tree line. Metallic sounds, boots on soft earth, the whir of mechanical devices, approached the sacred grove. Ilara maintained her position, though her heart began to race. Perhaps they were merely curious visitors. Ethel had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, and there had been a trickle of officials and researchers arriving to learn about their world. 4 figures emerged from the luminescent foliage. 3 wore the standardized gray and blue uniforms of Federation security personnel, complete with energy restraints at their belts and compact weapons holstered at their sides. The 4th, clearly their leader, stepped forward with an air of authority that seemed to compress the very atmosphere around him. Commander Cale Vance surveyed the grove with the measured gaze of someone who had seen countless worlds but remained unimpressed by their wonders. His dark hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his angular features seemed carved from stone. Only his eyes betrayed any humanity, deep blue and alert. They took in every detail of the scene before him. "Scan the area," he ordered one of his officers, his voice clipped and professional. The officer raised a handheld device, which emitted a subtle hum as it swept across the grove. "Commander, we're detecting high levels of unregistered class gamma bioenergy activity." Source confirmed. He nodded toward Ilara. Vance approached her, maintaining a cautious distance. "Identify yourself, citizen." Ilara lowered her arms slowly, careful not to disrupt the still active energy flows around her. "I am Ilara, Star Weaver of the Easter Groves. Why have you come to this sacred place during the equinox ritual?" "Star Weaver." Vance consulted his datapad. "That classification isn't registered with Federation authorities. It is an ancient role among our people," Ilara explained, her voice betraying a hint of impatience. "One that predates your Federation by millennia. Now, please state your purpose." This interruption endangers the calibration of the biological network. Vance's expression remained impassive, though something flickered behind his eyes, perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity. Nevertheless, he straightened his shoulders and adopted an official tone. "By authority of Galactic Federation Security Directive 7729, Section C, regarding unregistered bioenergetic and psionic activities on newly incorporated worlds, I am placing you under provisional arrest for unauthorized manipulation of Class Gamma bioenergy fields." Alara stared at him in disbelief, her skin flaring brighter with emotion. "Arrest? For performing my sacred duty? This is absurd. The directive is clear. All bioenergetic manipulations must be registered, evaluated, and licensed by Federation authorities." Vance gestured to one of his officers, who approached with restraints designed to suppress bioenergetic emissions. "These regulations exist for planetary security and to prevent destabilizing incidents." Alara stepped back, her expression transitioning from shock to indignation. "You cannot possibly understand what you're interfering with. This isn't some weapon or dangerous technology. It's the very lifeblood of our world." The plants around her responded to her distress, their luminescence intensifying and pulsing rapidly. Vance noticed this reaction, and for a brief moment, his professional mask slipped. There was indeed something extraordinary happening here, something that defied the clinical language of Federation security protocols. The energy surrounding the Athelian woman wasn't erratic or threatening. It moved with purpose, with harmony. It felt almost alive. But orders were orders. The Federation's rapid expansion had brought countless new worlds under its jurisdiction, and standardized protocols were the only way to maintain order across such diversity. If exceptions were made, the entire system would collapse. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," Vance said, his tone softening slightly. "This is a provisional detention while your case is reviewed. If your activities are deemed beneficial and non-threatening, you'll be issued proper licensing and released." Alara's multi-hued eyes locked with his. "You have no idea what you're doing," she said quietly, her voice trembling not with fear, but with certainty. "Without the completion of this ritual, the network will begin to destabilize. I am not performing this for myself. I am doing it for the health of the entire planet." Vance hesitated, but only for a moment. "You'll have opportunity to explain all this during your review. For now, you must come with us." As one of the officers secured the restraints around her wrists, Alara felt the terrible sensation of being partially disconnected from the energy network. The restraints didn't sever her connection completely. They couldn't, as it was part of her biological makeup, but they dampened it severely, like having a limb suddenly go numb. The grove around them dimmed visibly, the rhythmic pulses of light becoming irregular. A soft, keening sound emanated from the vegetation itself, as if the forest were crying out at the disruption. Vance noticed this change immediately, an unexpected reaction. The Federation botanists had classified Ethel's bioluminescent flora as simple reactive organisms, not capable of such coordinated responses. He made a mental note to include this observation in his report, though he wasn't certain to whom such information should be directed. The bureaucracy of the Federation had grown increasingly labyrinthine in recent years. As they led Alara from the sacred grove, she looked back at the dimming light, a single tear tracing a luminous path down her cheek. What these Federation officers couldn't understand was that they weren't just arresting one woman. They were disrupting the heartbeat of an entire world. Vance felt an uncharacteristic twinge of doubt as he observed the alien woman's quiet dignity. In 15 years of service to the Federation, he had enforced countless regulations on dozens of worlds. But something about this particular arrest left him unsettled. The woman, Alara, didn't fit the profile of the usual suspects he detained: smugglers, agitators, or dangerous psionics. There was something pure about her presence, something that resonated with a part of himself he had long ago buried beneath regulations and duty. As their shuttle lifted off from the forest clearing, Vance watched the bioluminescent canopy of Ethel spread out below them, a sea of gentle light now marred by a darkened patch where the sacred grove had begun to dim. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had just committed a grave error. The Federation outpost orbiting Ethel was a monument to standardization, identical in layout to dozens of similar installations throughout Federation space. Its stark white corridors and uniform gray fixtures formed a sterile environment that contrasted sharply with the organic beauty of the planet below. Alara sat motionless in the detention area, a transparent force barrier separating her from the corridor. The restraints had been removed once she was secured in the cell, but the damage had been done. Her connection to Ethel's energy network was tenuous at this distance, made worse by the outpost's electromagnetic fields. She could still sense it, a faint, distant pulse like a heartbeat heard underwater, but she could no longer interact with it, as a Star Weaver should. Her skin had lost much of its luminescence, now merely pale with subtle, occasional flickers of light tracing the patterns on her forearms. Her eyes, usually shifting through a spectrum of colors, had settled into a muted amber, a sign of distress among her people. Commander Vance stood at the security station, reviewing the preliminary scans taken during Alara's processing. The results were confusing. The bioenergy signature didn't match any known patterns in the Federation database. It wasn't destructive like weaponized psionics, nor was it erratic like untrained natural abilities. Instead, it showed complex, harmonious patterns that the analysis program struggled to categorize. "Commander, you need to see this." One of the technicians called over, pointing to a monitor displaying real-time data from Ethel's surface. "We're detecting unusual energy fluctuations in the region where we apprehended the subject." Vance examined the display. The darkened area he had noticed during their departure had spread like an ink blot on luminous fabric. The regular patterns of light that characterized Ethel's forests were becoming irregular, with some areas flaring too brightly while others dimmed completely. "Is this connected to the arrest?" Vance asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Impossible to determine with current data," the technician replied. "But the timing is suggestive." Vance frowned. "Pull up the documentation on Ethel's incorporation into the Federation. I want to review the preliminary cultural and biological assessments." The files appeared on his screen, and Vance's frown deepened as he read. Ethel's admission to the Federation had been expedited, unusual for a world with such a unique ecosystem. The biological surveys were cursory at best, and the cultural assessments contained minimal information about the Star Weavers and their role in Ethelian society. Instead, most of the documentation focused on the potential applications of Ethel's biological energy in Federation technology and medicine. An uneasy feeling settled in Vance's stomach. After years in the field, he had developed an instinct for political maneuvering disguised as security protocol. This had all the hallmarks of a hasty operation driven by someone's agenda rather than genuine security concerns. "Commander Vance?" He turned to find an unfamiliar woman approaching the security station. She wore the blue and white uniform of the Federation Science Division, and her identification badge named her as Dr. Eris Thorne, Xenoanthropology. "Dr. Thorne," Vance acknowledged with a nod. "I wasn't aware the Science Division had personnel on this outpost. I arrived last week to study Ethelian cultural practices," she explained, her tone professional but her eyes sharp with intelligence. "I was told you brought in one of the Star Weavers." "News travels fast," Vance remarked dryly. "On an outpost this size? Practically at light speed." A hint of a smile touched her lips before disappearing. "I'd like to speak with her, if possible. The Star Weavers are central to Ethelian society, and my research has barely scratched the surface of understanding their practices." Vance hesitated. "She's being held under Security Directive 7729. Access is restricted until her review." Dr. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "The Unregistered Bioenergetics Directive?" "Commander, with all due respect, that directive was designed for dangerous psionics and weaponized biological capabilities. From what I've observed, the Ethelian practices are sophisticated ecological management techniques, not weapons. Nevertheless, the directive applies to all unregistered bioenergetic activities," Vance replied, though his conviction sounded hollow even to his own ears. Thorne lowered her voice, stepping closer. "Between us, Commander, have you noticed how quickly certain factions pushed for Ethel's incorporation? Or how the detailed ecological surveys were mysteriously delayed while preliminary mining permits were fast-tracked?" Vance kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced. So he wasn't the only one who had noticed the irregularities. What are you suggesting, Doctor? I'm suggesting that science is being sidelined for exploitation, and security protocols are being misused to facilitate it. She glanced toward the detention area where Alara sat. That woman is not a security threat. She's an obstacle to someone's profit margin. Before Vance could respond, an alarm sounded from the monitoring station. The technician called out, "Commander, the energy disruptions on the surface are intensifying. We're registering seismic activity in 3 regions, and the bioluminescent patterns are showing signs of critical instability." Vance made a decision. "Dr. Thorne, I'd like your expert opinion on these readings. And perhaps you should join me for a preliminary interview with the detainee." Thorne's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she nodded. "I'd be happy to assist, Commander." As they approached the detention cell, Alara raised her head. Her gaze immediately went to Thorne, noting the difference in uniform before settling on Vance. "Your world is suffering," she said without preamble. "You can see it now, can't you? We're detecting energy fluctuations and seismic activity," Vance admitted, "deactivating the sound barrier while maintaining the force field." "Is this connected to the interrupted ritual?" "Of course it is," Alara replied, a hint of frustration in her voice. "The equinox calibration isn't just symbolic, it's essential. The energy network that sustains Ethel requires regular adjustment, especially at key astronomical junctures. Without it, the energies become imbalanced, creating cascading disruptions throughout the ecosystem. Like a pressure valve that needs regular release," Dr. Thorne suggested. Alara nodded. "A simplistic but not inaccurate analogy. Star weavers don't generate the energy. We redirect it, ensure its proper flow. Without our guidance, particularly at critical times like the equinox, the pressure builds in some areas while depleting in others." "And the restraints?" Vance asked. "What effect do they have?" "They dampen my connection to the network," Alara explained, her voice growing softer. "Even now, so far from the surface, I can feel Ethel's pain. It's difficult to describe to non-Ethelians. Imagine if parts of your nervous system began misfiring, sending too many signals in some places and none in others." Vance studied her closely. There was no deception in her manner, no hint of the manipulation he had often encountered in his work. Only genuine concern and a dignified restraint that belied the distress she claimed to feel. "Commander," Dr. Thorne interjected, gesturing to her datapad. "These readings support her explanation. The disruptions are following patterns consistent with energy flow imbalance, not random deterioration or deliberate sabotage." Vance made another decision, one that could potentially end his career. "Dr. Thorne, would you be willing to prepare a preliminary scientific assessment supporting the classification of Starweaver activities as essential ecological management rather than unregulated bioenergetic manipulation?" Thorne's eyes lit up with understanding. "I could have that ready within the hour, Commander." "Good." Vance turned back to Alara. "I'm initiating an on-site investigation of the surface disturbances, with you accompanying as a cultural and ecological consultant under my direct supervision. Technically, you'll still be in custody, but you'll be able to demonstrate the nature of your work firsthand." Hope flared in Alara's eyes, literally. Flecks of bright gold swirled in the amber. "You would allow me to complete the ritual?" "If the evidence supports your claims, yes," Vance replied cautiously. "But understand that I'm taking a significant professional risk. If this is anything other than what you described—" "It isn't," Alara interrupted, standing up gracefully. "I swear by the first light. Take me back to the sacred grove, and I will show you the truth of the Star Weavers. And perhaps then you will understand why your Federation's one-size-fits-all directives cannot apply to Ethel." As they prepared for the return to the planet's surface, Vance found himself wondering what other truths awaited discovery on the luminous world below, and what forces within the Federation might be displeased by those discoveries. The shuttle descended through Ethel's atmosphere, allowing Vance and Alara their first clear view of the growing crisis. From above, the planet's famous bioluminescent forest had always appeared as vast seas of blue-green light, pulsing with gentle, regular rhythms. Now, those patterns were visibly disrupted, Some areas flashed with too bright intensity, while others had dimmed to near darkness. It resembled a malfunctioning circuit, power surging and failing in unpredictable patterns. "It's worse than I feared," Elara murmured, pressing her palm against the viewport. Even through the shuttle's electromagnetic shielding, she could feel the planet's distress. Her connection to Ethel's energy network strengthened as they approached, but what had once been a harmonious symphony now felt like discordant noise, painful in its chaos. Vance observed her reaction closely. The restraints had been removed completely for this expedition, justified by Dr. Thorne's hasty but thorough report classifying Alara's abilities as essential biological regulatory functions, rather than unregistered bioenergetic manipulations. It was a tenuous distinction that wouldn't hold up to intense scrutiny, but it gave them the legal coverage they needed for now. "Where should we land?" Vance asked, taking manual control of the shuttle. "The Sacred Grove?" Elara shook her head. "No, the disruption has progressed too far for a simple resumption of the ritual. We need to go to the Heartwood first, the central node of the Eastern Energy Network. From there, I can assess the full extent of the damage and determine what adjustments must be made." As they approached the coordinates Elara provided, Vance was struck by the visible evidence of disturbance below. The forest canopy moved unnaturally, trees swaying, despite the lack of wind. Occasionally, surges of bright light pulsed through sections of the forest like lightning beneath the leaves. They sat down in a small clearing that was flickering between illumination and darkness. As soon as the shuttle's doors opened, the difference between the outpost's sterile environment and Ethel's living ecosystem became overwhelming. The air itself seemed charged with energy, not just oxygen and nitrogen, but something else, something that made the hairs on Vance's arms stand on end. Elara stepped onto her homeworld and immediately fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the direct reconnection to the energy network. Her skin blazed with light, the patterns on her arms flowing through a rapid sequence of colors as she processed the information flooding her senses. "Are you all right?" Vance moved to her side, concerned. "Yes," she gasped. "It's just so much. The network is screaming with imbalance." She took a deep breath and rose to her feet, her movements becoming more fluid as she adjusted to the connection. "We must hurry. This way." She led Vance into the forest, moving with certainty despite the chaotic light conditions. The path they followed seemed to stabilize somewhat in Alara's presence, the violent fluctuations calming to a manageable rhythm as she passed, only to resume their erratic behavior once she moved on. Vance activated his scanner, documenting the energy patterns. The disruptions appear to be self-perpetuating. Each imbalance creates stress on adjacent systems, which then develop their own imbalances. "Exactly," Elara confirmed without slowing her pace. "The network is like a web. Damage in one section strains the connecting threads. That's why the Starweaver's work is so crucial. We don't just maintain, we prevent cascading failures." They walked for nearly an hour, traveling deeper into the forest than Vance had ventured during his previous visits to Ethel. The trees grew larger here, their crystal-like bark thicker and more elaborate. The bioluminescence was also different, deeper, more complex in its patterns, reminiscent of language rather than simple biological reactions. The Federation reports classified all of this as reactive vegetation, Vance remarked, indicating the intricate light patterns. "But it's more than that, isn't it?" Elara gave him a sidelong glance. "Much more. Your Federation sees with instruments designed to measure what you already understand. They catalog the familiar and dismiss the rest as primitive or irrelevant." There was no accusation in her tone, only a simple statement of fact, but Vance felt the sting of truth nonetheless. How many wonders had he overlooked in his years of service because they didn't fit neatly into Federation classifications? "There," Elara pointed ahead, where the forest opened into a circular clearing dominated by a massive tree unlike any Vance had seen on Ethel. It towered above the others, its trunk wide enough that 20 people linking hands might not encircle it. Unlike the crystal bark of the other trees, This one's surface appeared fluid, rippling with colors that flowed like liquid light. At its base, massive roots breached the soil, forming natural arches and chambers. The heartwood, Ilara explained reverently, one of 7 major nodes in Ethel's energy network. From here, I can better assess. A violent tremor interrupted her, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Around the clearing, trees flashed with painfully bright light before going dark completely. Ilara cried out, clutching her head as if in pain. "What's happening?" Vance steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "A rupture in the network. A critical node failing," she gasped. "We have less time than I thought." She rushed toward the heartwood, Vance following close behind. At the base of the great tree, she placed her palms against its undulating surface and closed her eyes, her skin synchronizing with the tree's rhythmic illumination. "Yes," she murmured after a moment. "I can see it now." The interruption of the equinox ritual was only part of the problem. There's something else, a foreign energy signature disrupting key nodes. It's artificial, invasive. Vance's instincts sharpened. "Show me." Ilara guided one of his hands to the tree's surface. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced. Not quite solid, not quite liquid, vibrating with information that he could somehow perceive, though not interpret as Ilara could. There, she guided his awareness. That dissonance, that isn't natural to Ethel. Vance couldn't understand the information as Ilara did, but he recognized the pattern. That's a Federation energy signature. Specifically, it resembles our deep scanning technology, the kind used for resource assessment. Ilara pulled away from the tree, her expression troubled. "Resource assessment? You mean mining? Or similar extraction activities?" Vance confirmed grimly. "But those operations require extensive approval processes and environmental impact studies. Nothing like that has been authorized for Ethel. Unless someone is operating outside official channels," Ilara suggested. Before Vance could respond, his communication device signaled an incoming transmission. "Vance here. Commander," came Dr. Thorne's urgent voice. "You need to evacuate immediately. Colonel Stryker has arrived with a special operations team. He's overriding your authority and has issued orders for the redetention of the Athelian subject. He's claiming you've been compromised." Vance's jaw tightened. Colonel Harlan Stryker was a high-ranking official in Federation Security's Resource Protection Division, a department known for its aggressive approach to securing valuable assets on member worlds. If Stryker was personally involved, the situation was more serious than Vance had imagined. "Understood, Doctor. Any chance of appealing through proper channels?" "None," Thorne replied bluntly. "He's operating with special authorization from the Resource Development Council. They're claiming urgent security concerns." "Of course they are," Vance muttered. "Stay safe, Doctor. We'll handle things from here." He ended the transmission and turned to Ilara, who had heard everything. "We have a problem. Your people are coming to take me back," she stated simply. "But you don't intend to let them." "No, I don't," Vance confirmed, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "What we've discovered here goes beyond regulatory violations. Someone is deliberately exploiting Ethel, causing ecological damage, and using security protocols as cover. I can't stand by and allow that." Ilara studied him with her multi-hued eyes. "Why? A day ago, you arrested me for following my sacred duty. What changed?" Vance considered the question seriously. "I saw the evidence. I listened. He hesitated, then admitted, "I felt the living energy of your world. The Federation is supposed to protect and nurture, not exploit and destroy. If I ignore that principle because of political pressure or inconvenient regulations, then everything I've served for means nothing." A small smile touched Ilara's lips, bringing light to her features. "Then perhaps there is hope for understanding between our peoples after all." Her expression turned serious again. "But now we must act quickly. If your Colonel Stryker reaches us before I can stabilize the critical nodes, the damage may become irreversible." "What do you need to do?" "I must perform an emergency calibration ritual. Not the full equinox ceremony, but enough to prevent catastrophic failure." She gestured to the heartwood. This node will amplify my efforts, allowing me to reach further than I could alone. And the Federation technology causing the disruption? I cannot disable it directly, Ilera admitted. But if I can strengthen the network enough, it will naturally resist the invasive energy. Think of it as bolstering an immune system to fight infection. Vance checked his weapon, a standard-issue Federation pulse pistol, effective but not devastating. Do what you need to do. I'll watch for Stryker and his team. Ilera approached the heartwood again, placing both palms against its surface. This time, she began to sing, a haunting melody without recognizable words, rising and falling in patterns that somehow matched the flowing colors of the great tree. Her skin brightened in response, her entire body becoming a conduit for the energy she was attempting to direct. Vance took up a position at the edge of the clearing, scanner active to detect approaching life forms. His mind raced with contingency plans. Directly opposing a superior officer like Stryker was career suicide, possibly even grounds for criminal charges. But what choice did he have? The evidence of wrongdoing was clear, though proving it through official channels would take time they didn't have. His scanner pinged, multiple contacts approaching rapidly from the direction of their landing site. Stryker wasn't wasting any time. Ilera, he called softly, not wanting to disrupt her concentration. We have company coming. How much longer do you need? She didn't break her song, but she held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. Vance doubted they had that long. He was right. Within moments, the electronic whine of a Federation hover platform sounded through the trees, followed by the distinctive heavy footsteps of armored security personnel. Vance positioned himself between the approaching team and Ilera, his posture relaxed but his hand near his weapon. Colonel Harlan Stryker emerged first from the forest path, flanked by 4 special operations officers in full tactical gear. Stryker was a tall, imposing figure with close-cropped gray hair and cold eyes set in a perpetually disapproving expression. His uniform bore the additional insignia of the Resource Protection Division, a stylized shield overlaid with mining tools, a visual representation of the division's priorities. Commander Vance, Stryker greeted him with artificial cordiality. I see you found our fugitive. Stand aside, and we'll take her into custody. His gaze shifted to Ilera and the heartwood behind her. Fascinating specimen, isn't it? That tree alone contains enough bioactive material to revolutionize Federation medicine. She's not a fugitive, Colonel, Vance replied calmly. She's under my supervision for an authorized ecological investigation. Stryker's smile didn't reach his eyes. That authorization has been revoked, Commander. We have reason to believe you've been influenced by unregistered bioenergetic fields. It's quite common on worlds like this. Affects judgment, creates inappropriate sympathies. He gestured to his team. Now step aside, or I'll have you detained for medical evaluation as well. Vance held his ground. Before you proceed, Colonel, you should know that I've documented the unauthorized resource scanning devices deployed throughout Ethel's energy network. Devices that are directly contributing to the planetary instability we're currently experiencing. Stryker's expression hardened. Those are authorized security monitoring systems, Commander, essential for tracking potentially dangerous bioenergetic emissions. With mining resonance patterns? Vance challenged. I've been in Federation service for 15 years, Colonel. I know the difference between security monitoring and resource profiling. Behind them, Ilera's song grew more intense, the heartwood responding with pulses of increasingly organized light that spread outward through the surrounding forest. The ground trembled again, but with less violence than before, more like the settling of a system finding its balance. Stryker noticed the change, his attention shifting fully to Ilera. Stop that immediately, he ordered. When she continued, unresponsive to his command, he gestured sharply to his team. Restrain her. Use the high-grade suppressors. Stand down, Colonel. Vance moved to block their path, drawing his weapon. What she's doing is stabilizing the planet. Your unauthorized scanning equipment has disrupted critical biological systems. This is treason, Vance, Stryker snarled, his facade of professionalism falling away. That alien energy is too valuable to leave in the hands of primitives who don't understand its potential. The Federation needs new energy sources, new technologies to maintain its position. A few trees and some local customs are acceptable losses. Not according to Federation law, Vance countered. Not according to the principles we're sworn to uphold. Stryker drew his own weapon, a more advanced model than Vance's standard issue. The law is what people like me say it is, Commander. Now for the last time, stand aside. The standoff might have erupted into violence then, but something unexpected happened. The heartwood behind Alara suddenly blazed with light so intense that everyone in the clearing was momentarily blinded. When their vision cleared, the entire forest around them had synchronized its bioluminescence into a steady, powerful glow. Alara's song reached its conclusion, and she turned to face them, her skin radiating with controlled energy that made her appear almost divine. "I have temporarily stabilized the network," she announced, her voice carrying an authority that silenced even Stryker momentarily. "But the foreign devices must be removed for permanent healing to occur." Stryker recovered quickly. "Arrest them both," he ordered his team, but the officers hesitated, looking around as the forest continued to change. The ground beneath their feet had begun to glow with the same light as the trees, and delicate tendrils of luminous energy were visibly flowing through the soil, converging on the clearing. "Colonel," one of the officers warned, "our scanners are picking up massive energy surges. Whatever she did, it's affecting our equipment." As if to confirm this, the officer's weapons suddenly powered down, the indicator lights going dark. Stryker's more advanced sidearm sputtered and failed as well, much to his visible shock. "What have you done?" he demanded of Alara. "I have asked Ethel to protect itself," she replied simply. "The network is now actively rejecting foreign energy signatures that cause harm. Your devices will not function as long as your intentions remain hostile." "Impossible," Stryker spat. "No biological system is that sophisticated. Your arrogance blinds you to the truth before your eyes," Alaris said, not unkindly. "Ethel is not just a collection of trees and creatures. It is a single, vast intelligence expressed through countless interconnected beings. The Star Weavers don't control this intelligence. We merely communicate with it, maintain dialogue between our people and the greater consciousness of our world." Vance, whose weapon had also deactivated, holstered it. Deliberately. "Colonel, I suggest we all stand down and discuss this rationally. Clearly, we're dealing with something far more complex than our initial assessments indicated." Before Stryker could respond, a new sound filled the air, the distinctive hum of Federation shuttles, multiple craft descending toward the clearing. Through gaps in the canopy, Vance could see the insignia of the Federation Science Division on their hulls, not the Security Division's emblem. "What now?" Stryker muttered, his composure cracking further. A voice boomed from the lead shuttle's external speakers as it hovered above the clearing. "Colonel Stryker, this is Admiral Kincaid of the Federation Science Council. You are hereby ordered to stand down immediately. Your authorization has been revoked pending investigation." The look of shock on Stryker's face was almost comical. "This is absurd. I have direct authorization from the Resource Development Council, which has been superseded." The voice continued as one of the shuttles landed at the edge of the clearing. The hatch opened to reveal a distinguished older woman in an admiral's uniform, accompanied by Dr. Thorne and several other Science Division officials. "The Science Council has emergency jurisdiction in cases of potential ecological catastrophe. And according to the data Dr. Thorne has been transmitting, that's exactly what we're facing." Admiral Kincaid strode into the clearing, her gaze taking in the scene with the practiced assessment of a veteran officer. "Commander Vance," she acknowledged with a nod before turning to Alara. "And you must be the Star Weaver we've heard so much about." Alara inclined her head respectfully. "I am Alara of the Eastern Groves. Dr. Thorne has provided us with quite an education about your role," the Admiral said, genuine interest in her voice. "I apologize for the Federation's heavy-handed approach to your world. It seems we have much to learn about Ethel." "Admiral, this is outrageous," Stryker protested. The alien was engaging in unauthorized bioenergetic manipulations that threatened Federation security. "What I saw," Dr. Thor interjected, stepping forward with a data pad displaying multiple graphs and readings, "was an intelligent being preventing a planetary catastrophe caused by unauthorized resource scanning devices." She handed the pad to Admiral Kincaid. "Devices that were deployed without proper environmental impact assessments or Science Council approval." Kincaid reviewed the data, her expression hardening. "Colonel Stryker, who authorized the deployment of Class 7 resonance scanners on a category of biologically sensitive world?" Stryker's composure cracked further. "The Resource Development Council determined that expedited assessment was necessary for..." "For what?" Kincaid cut him off. "For bypassing proper protocols? For endangering a newly joined member world." She gestured to her security team. "Colonel Stryker, you are relieved of duty pending a full investigation into these activities. Your team will surrender all weapons and return to the flagship immediately." As Stryker and his team were escorted away, Vance felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to find Alara watching the proceedings with a mixture of relief and wariness. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "Not entirely," Vance admitted. "But Admiral Kincaid is known for her integrity. If anyone can ensure justice is done, it's her." Admiral Kincaid approached them, having handed off Stryker to her security detail. "Commander Vance, your actions today will require extensive debriefing." When Vance straightened, preparing for reprimand, she added, "and likely commendation. It takes courage to stand against a superior officer when principles are at stake." "Thank you, Admiral," Vance replied, surprised by the praise. Kincaid turned to Alara. "As for you, Starweaver, I understand your work is not yet complete. Dr. Thorne informs me that while you've stabilized the immediate crisis, the damage from our intrusive technology remains." "That is correct," Alara confirmed. "The foreign devices disrupt the natural flow of energy. They must be removed for full healing to occur." "Consider it done," Kincaid promised. "I've already dispatched teams with Dr. Thorne's guidance to locate and remove all unauthorized equipment. But I understand there's another matter, an interrupted ritual that needs completion." Alara's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, the equinox calibration. Without it, the balance will gradually deteriorate again, though not as catastrophically as before." "Then by all means," Kincaid gestured to the forest, "please continue your duties. Commander Vance will accompany you, both as protection and as the Federation's witness to these important procedures. We have much to learn about proper cooperation with Ethel." As the Admiral returned to coordinate the wider response with her team, Vance turned to Alara. "Ready to finish what you started?" A genuine smile transformed Alara's face, bringing a luminous quality to her features beyond the biological glow of her skin. "Yes, but we must hurry. The sacred grove will be most receptive at sunset, which approaches soon." Their journey back through the forest was dramatically different from their earlier trek. The chaotic fluctuations had settled into more regular patterns, though still not the perfect harmony Vance had witnessed on previous visits to Ethel. More significantly, the forest seemed to respond to Alara's presence with what could only be described as recognition. Paths seemed to open before them, branches lifted to avoid obstacles, and the bioluminescence brightened to guide their way. "The network recognizes you," Vance observed as they walked. "It recognizes all Ethelians to some degree," Alara explained. "But Starweavers develop a deeper connection through years of training. We learn the language of light and energy that Ethel speaks." "Can others learn this language? Non-Ethelians, I mean." Alara gave him a thoughtful look. "Perhaps, with time and the right intention. Our historians speak of visitors from other worlds, long before your Federation, who stayed for many cycles and eventually learned to sense the network, if not manipulate it as we do." The idea appealed to Vance more than he expected. After years of moving from world to world, enforcing regulations, and never truly connecting, the thought of understanding a living planet's consciousness was profoundly attractive. They reached the sacred grove as the primary sun of Ethel's system touched the horizon, bathing the crystal-like trees in golden light that refracted through their structures in dazzling patterns. The grove had recovered somewhat from the earlier disruption, but Vance could see that the rhythms were still irregular, the harmony incomplete. Alara moved to the center of the grove, the same spot where he had arrested her what seemed like a lifetime ago, though less than a full planetary rotation had passed. She turned to him with surprising hesitation. "Commander Vance." "Kale," he corrected her. "After everything, I think we're beyond titles." "Kale," she repeated, the name musical in her accent. "I must ask something unusual of you. The network has been severely strained, and my connection alone may not be sufficient for a complete recalibration. What do you need?" "Ethel has recognized you," she said carefully. "I felt it in the forest, a resonance between your energy and the network. It's unusual for non-Ethelians, especially so quickly. If you're willing, you could serve as an anchor point while I complete the more complex aspects of the weaving." Vance raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I understand what that entails." "You would stand within the calibration field, maintaining focus and intention while I perform the ritual. Your presence, your witnessing with respect and openness, would strengthen the pattern." She hesitated. "It's traditionally a role for Athelian elders, but circumstances are far from traditional." Without hesitation, Vance nodded. "I would be honored." Relief and something warmer flooded Alara's expression. "Thank you. Please stand here." She positioned him at a specific point within the grove, where the fading sunlight created a natural spotlight through the canopy. "Focus on your breathing, and if you feel a connection to the energy around you, don't resist it. Simply observe and accept." Vance followed her instructions, watching as she took her position in the center of the grove. As the sun's final light faded, the natural bioluminescence of the forest intensified. Alara began the ritual, her movements more elaborate than what Vance had interrupted earlier. This was clearly the full ceremony, not the emergency intervention she had performed at the Heartwood. Her dance, for there was no better word for the flowing, precise movements, traced complex patterns in the air. With each gesture, threads of light seemed to follow her fingertips, creating luminous geometries that hovered in the space around her. Her skin brightened until she was a living star at the heart of the grove, and the melody she sang resonated with tones that seemed to vibrate through Vance's very cells. At first, he was merely an observer, awed by the beauty and precision of the ritual. But gradually, something changed. The ground beneath his feet began to feel less solid, more like a permeable membrane through which energy flowed. The air around him thickened with potential, and the boundaries between himself and his surroundings became less distinct. Then he felt it, a gentle pressure against his consciousness, like a question without words. Understanding instinctively, he opened his mind to it, accepting the contact. The connection was nothing like he had imagined. Not an invasion or a takeover, but an expansion, as if his awareness had suddenly stretched beyond the confines of his body to encompass the grove, the forest, and beyond. He could feel the network Alara had described, not as an abstract concept, but as a living reality, a vast, conscious system of which every tree, every creature, every stone was an integral part. And at the center of this expanded awareness was Alara, her presence a brilliant nexus of intention and harmony. Vance could sense her surprise at the depth of his connection, followed by relief and gratitude as she drew upon his steady presence to anchor the more complex patterns she was weaving. Together, her expert guidance and his stable focus, they moved through the ritual. Vance couldn't have described the process in technical terms, but he understood on a fundamental level that they were restoring balance, releasing accumulated pressure in some areas while strengthening weak points in others. It was like watching a master engineer recalibrate an impossibly complex machine, except this machine was alive and responsive to their care. The ritual reached its crescendo as Ethel's smaller moon rose above the horizon, adding its silvery light to the bioluminescent display. The patterns Alara had created throughout the grove suddenly connected, forming a complete geometric structure that pulsed once with blinding intensity before dissolving into countless motes of light that spread outward through the forest like seeds carried on the wind. The connection gradually faded, returning Vance to the more limited awareness of his physical body. He found himself kneeling on the forest floor, breathing heavily as if he'd run a great distance. Across the grove, Ilera also knelt, her luminescence having dimmed to its normal gentle glow. Their eyes met, and a wordless understanding passed between them. What they had shared could not be undone or forgotten. They had experienced each other's essence in a way few beings ever did, and the bond created would not easily dissolve. "Is it completed?" Vance asked softly, finding his voice rough with emotion. Ilera nodded, rising gracefully to her feet. "Yes, the network is rebalanced, and the damage is healing. By the next dawn, Ethel will have fully recovered." She approached him, offering a hand to help him stand. "You connected more deeply than I expected. Few non-Ethelians have ever achieved such resonance, especially on a first attempt." Vance accepted her help, noticing that the contact between their hands created a subtle harmonic in the light patterns of her skin. "There are no adequate words in my language." "Nor in mine," she admitted with a smile. "But words aren't always necessary for understanding." The peaceful moment was interrupted by the soft hum of an approaching Federation shuttle. Dr. Thorne's voice came through Vance's communicator. "Commander, Admiral Kincaid requests your presence at the Federation outpost. The Science Council has convened an emergency session regarding Ethel's status and protection." Vance acknowledged the message and turned to Ilera. "Will you come? Your testimony could be crucial in establishing new protocols for Federation interaction with your world." "Of course," she agreed. "The time for isolation has passed. If Ethel is to be part of your Federation, then we must ensure it is on terms that respect the living nature of our world." She paused, studying him with her kaleidoscopic eyes. "And perhaps there's a role for someone who understands both sides, someone who has experienced a network but knows the Federation's ways." The implication was clear, and Vance found himself hoping she was right. The thought of serving as a bridge between these worlds, of continuing to explore the connection he had only begun to understand, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. 3 standard months later, the sacred grove of Ethel hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from the Federation's Science Council, the newly formed Planetary Consciousness Study Group, and the Ethelian Council of Elders convened beneath the crystal-like trees, whose bioluminescence had been restored to its full, harmonious glory. Admiral Kincaid stood beside the eldest of the Star Weavers, a dignified Ethelian whose luminous skin had faded to a soft silver with age. Together, they unveiled a memorial stone that would mark the beginning of a new relationship between Ethel and the Galactic Federation. "Today, we acknowledge past mistakes and commit to a more enlightened future," Kincaid announced to the assembled dignitaries. The Ethel Accords established this world as a protected bioconsciousness preserve, with all research and interaction to be conducted under the joint supervision of Federation scientists and Ethelian Star Weavers. The elder Star Weaver added, "And we welcome the opportunity to share our understanding of the great network of life, not as a resource to be exploited, but as a teacher from whom all species might learn." Near the back of the gathering, Ilera and Vance, now designated as the first official liaison officer to Ethel, stood side by side, their fingers lightly intertwined. "Colonel Stryker's trial begins next week," Vance mentioned quietly. "The evidence against him and several members of the Resource Development Council is overwhelming." Dr. Thorne's documentation was meticulous. "Justice matters," Ilera acknowledged, "but I'm more interested in healing and growth." She nodded toward a group of young Federation scientists who were being instructed by an Ethelian in the basics of energy sensing. "Already, some of your people show aptitude for connecting with the network." "Not as strongly as some," Vance replied with a smile, squeezing her hand gently. Since that first ritual, his sensitivity to Ethel's energy had continued to develop. He couldn't manipulate it as the Star Weavers did, but he could sense its patterns, feel its rhythms in a way that astounded the Federation researchers studying the phenomenon. The leading theory suggested that his initial neural patterns had possessed a rare compatibility with Ethel's energy frequencies, a compatibility that had been dramatically enhanced by his participation in the equinox ritual. Whatever the scientific explanation, the personal reality was that he had found a connection to a world and a woman that transcended his previous understanding of relationship. The irony wasn't lost on him, that he, who had come to arrest Alara for illegal bioenergetic activity, was now himself a subject of study for his unique bioenergetic bond with Ethel. The formal ceremony concluded, and the gathering began to disperse into smaller groups for discussions and demonstrations. Alara led Vance away from the crowds, deeper into the forest where the light was softer and the energy flowed in gentle currents around them. "I received approval for the exchange program," she told him when they were alone. 10 Star Weavers will visit the Federation Academy next cycle to teach the basics of bioenergetic harmony, and a similar number of Federation scientists will study here. "That's excellent progress," Vance replied. "A year ago, I wouldn't have believed such cooperation was possible. A year ago, I was simply a Star Weaver tending my grove, and you were simply a Federation commander following orders," Alara reminded him. "Neither of us could have imagined where fate would lead." Vance chuckled. "I certainly never imagined that the words by order of the Galactic Federation, 'You're under arrest,' would be the beginning of the most important relationship of my life." Alara's multi-hued eyes sparkled with amusement and affection. "The universe has strange ways of bringing together those who need to find each other." She raised her hand, palm outward, and Vance mirrored the gesture. As their palms met, their energies resonated visibly. His human aura, normally invisible but now sensitized by Ethel's influence, meeting her Ethelian luminescence in a swirl of complementary patterns. "The network recognizes us as one," she said softly. "Different in origin, but harmonized in purpose." "A good model for Ethel and the Federation," Vance suggested. "And for whatever adventures await us next," Alara agreed. Above them, the light filtering through the crystal bar trees created patterns that seemed to dance in approval. Ethel, the living planet that had brought them together, continued its ancient rhythms, now with new protectors and new friends to ensure its harmony would endure for generations to come. And in the sacred grove where their story began, where a shocked alien girl had faced a Federation officer with an arrest order, two beings from different worlds had found not just mutual understanding, but a connection that transcended the boundaries of their species and their past. Together, they stood as living proof that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the most beautiful harmonies in the vast, ever-surprising symphony of the universe.